What if I told you that the greatest spiritual transformation in history didn't begin with a miracle, but with a brutal fall? Sounds impossible, right? Especially in a world where strength, success, and recognition are seen as symbols of greatness. But what if someone had proven otherwise? What if a man, driven by ambition, vanity, and a thirst for glory, had discovered the true meaning of life precisely at the moment he lost everything? Stay with me until the end, because what you're about to learn could completely change how you see failure and purpose. This man was Ignatius of Loyola, a Spanish nobleman who grew up believing that honor, power, and military titles were the pinnacle of existence. He possessed poise, courage, influence, and the respect of those around him. But behind that proud and intense figure, there was a silence he didn't acknowledge, as if the achievements he sought were never enough. Have you ever felt that? Have you ever experienced that moment when, no matter how much everything seems to be in its place, something inside you remains restless? That's precisely how the story of this warrior begins, a warrior who only discovered his own soul when his pride was shattered. Restlessness was always within Ignatius, even when he tried to ignore it. Amidst noble feasts, military strategies, and long conversations about honor and reputation, there was a discomfort that insisted on growing, as if something greater called to him behind every victory he imagined achieving. And perhaps this speaks to you too. Have you ever had the feeling that you run, conquer, strive, but still feel like something is missing that the world can't deliver? If this topic resonates with you, leave a comment about what has touched you most so far, because sometimes when someone shares their own restlessness, it helps another person who is also searching for answers. And that's why this channel exists, to revisit stories that make us look inward and awaken feelings and questions that the rush of daily life often silences. So if this type of content resonates with you, leave a like. It shows that these reflections have value and helps this message reach more people who may be going through the same inner conflict. And if you want to continue exploring these journeys with me, subscribe to the channel. Your presence is what makes this space alive, profound, and necessary. Now, take a deep breath, because Ignatius's life is about to be turned upside down in a way he never imagined. Before any transformation occurred, Ignatius was a young man determined to become a great knight. Born into a noble family, he received a refined education, was surrounded by powerful influences, and grew up believing his destiny lay on the battlefield. He was ambitious, vain, and passionate about the idea of glory. Walking through the castle corridors, it was as if he carried an energy that drew attention. Everyone knew that this young man sought greatness, but no one perceived the weight he carried within. Ignatius stood out, spoke intensely, dreamed big, but it was precisely this desire for greatness that concealed his greatest weakness. The more he sought titles and recognition, the more he felt that nothing filled the void within him. This conflict began to shape his mindset, as if something whispered in the background of life that he was running in the wrong direction. This unease, however, would not remain hidden for long. War, the very scenario he so longed for, would be precisely where everything would crumble. In the Battle of Pamplona, Ignatius fought with the intensity of someone who saw victory as his only identity. But a single cannon shot changed everything. His leg was shattered, his pride crushed, his image of invincibility destroyed before everyone. Ignatius was taken home humiliated, weakened, dependent, and that, for someone so proud, was worse than the physical pain itself. For months he lay confined to his bed, staring at the ceiling and his own thoughts. He tried to fill his mind with tales of knights and heroic romances, but all he found were books of saints and the life of Christ. And the more he read, the more he felt something stirring within him, a light he couldn't explain. It was in this space between fever, silence, and suffering that the phrase that would change everything within him emerged. What if I sought to serve a greater king? It wasn't just a reflection. It was a calling, a profound, intimate calling that stirred his soul. This calling didn't just remain in his memory, it began to demand action. After months of trying to return to his old life, Ignatius realized he no longer fit into it. Nothing made sense as it once did. There were no more parties, no ambition, no uniform that could fit his transformed heart. Then came the decision no one expected. In Montserrat, before the image of Our Lady, he laid down his sword, the one that represented years of pride, and gave his noble clothes to a beggar. There, in that silent act, a completely new man was born. Resignation did not diminish him. On the contrary, it freed him. Comment below, this makes sense to me.
But the journey didn't end there. On the contrary, it was only beginning. Ignatius didn't seek comfort. He didn't try to create a new identity based on outward piety. He chose the most difficult path, inner confrontation. In Manresa, he lived through months of extreme poverty, hunger, penance, and spiritual battles so intense that they almost destroyed him. While many thought poverty was a sign of failure, Ignatius began to see in it a hidden truth. It was poverty that revealed what really mattered. He served the poor, accompanied the sick, walked without possessions, fought against his own thoughts, wept before his miseries, and learned, little by little, to perceive God in small things. It was there that he began to understand the movements of the soul, when the light came from God and when it came from illusion. Each tear, each silence, each sleepless night shaped his new vision of the world, and this vision would deepen even further. Because one day, on the banks of the Cardoner River, Ignatius had an experience that human words cannot fully explain. He saw, not with the eyes of his body, but with his soul, a clarity about creation, about God, about the meaning of everything. This was not imagination, it was revelation, an inner light that reorganized his mind, his faith, his vocation. From this profound experience were born the spiritual exercises, one of the most powerful methods of discernment in the history of Christian spirituality. Ignatius not only learned to listen to God, he dedicated the rest of his life to teaching others to discern as well. But this inner transformation wasn't limited to visions or profound feelings. It began to demand something even more radical from Ignatius, to dedicate his entire life to a purpose he didn't yet fully understand. It was during this period that a new restlessness arose within him, different from the military ambition that had driven him in the past. Now what burned in his heart was the desire to help others perceive what he himself had discovered in pain and light. He began to write, organize ideas, record the movements of his soul, gradually creating a spiritual path that could lead anyone to a real experience with God. It wasn't theory, it was the fruit of tears, anguish, and silent illuminations. And the more Ignatius understood his own inner self, the more he realized he was not alone in this calling. People began to seek him out, drawn by the way he viewed life, by the serene firmness of his words, by the depth with which he understood the human condition. This is how his first companions were born. Not soldiers of war, but spiritual pilgrims who, like him, sought something greater than the world could offer. In this union of restless souls yearning for transformation, the seed of what would become one of the greatest evangelizing forces in history was sown. And Ignatius, now totally surrendered to the divine, realized that his mission was not only to change himself, but to help others rediscover their own inner truth. Ignatius's death was not marked by glory, applause, or speeches. He died poor, dedicated and serene after founding an order that would transform the world, the Society of Jesus. His missionaries would cross oceans, his schools would form brilliant minds, and his writings would convert restless souls. Ignatius showed that the greatest battle in life is the one that takes place within, that the greatest victory is not an external warfare, but an inner conversion, and that whoever surrenders to God's will becomes unstoppable. If you've made it this far, I can sense that this story has touched you in some way. Saint Ignatius left not only a religious legacy, he left a path of discernment, a way of seeing life that transforms any soul willing to be worked on by God. If this message resonated with you, leave a comment saying, "This message was for me." That's how I know you've walked with me to the end. And if you want to continue exploring stories that illuminate the soul and reveal hidden truths, subscribe to the channel. It's your presence that keeps this space alive, necessary, and profound. Oh, and leave a like. It helps this message reach those who also need to hear it today. There's a video over here that continues this inner journey. Click and come along.